And welcome back to Morning Shot. Today, we have a special guest with us. We have Mr. Acc MAGASHULE. Hello, Mr. Acc. How are you doing?
I'm fine, Baron and Rowan. Very well. Wonderful afternoon in Johannesburg. And I hope all guys, you are okay.
Well, on my side of the world, we've just had all of these floods everywhere. There's crazy tidal waves everywhere. So it's a little bit hectic down my side of the world.
Yeah, but Johannesburg.
If it's not floods, it's fires. If it's not fires, it's unemployment, it's load shedding, it's water shedding. There is something happening in this country. I don't know whether it's a curse.
It's almost like the end times, huh?
Yeah. Well, let's see what happens.
Absolutely. So really glad to have you on today. For those of you who don't know in our audience, Mr. MAGASHULE was a former Secretary General of the ANC. For those of you who don't know, the Secretary General role is basically the CEO. So he basically ran the place. And then some kerfuffles happened, and Mr. MAGASHULE left the party, and he's now created his own party. Mr. MAGASHULE, tell us a little bit about the new party that you've created.
Well, Byron, we call this party a people's party. We are about the people and we'll rise and fall on behalf of the people. And I'm talking about the people of this country, South Africa, a wonderful, beautiful country. If all of us can make it happen, and that's why the rest of my life I fought for a non-racial, non-sexist, united, democratic, but prosperous South Africa for all. And I think we have not yet reached prosperity. That's why we always want to talk in the Freedom Charter about sharing the wealth of the country. The rijkdom van die land verdeel. I always say that as a boy born in the Free State.
So, Mr. MAGASHULE, when you say that the revolution hasn't been finalized or the wealth hasn't been shared adequately, two questions on that. Number one, why do you think that is? And number two, should you achieve your goal, what does it actually look like for the people of South Africa?
Well, we have fought, and I will continue fighting against monopolies, because this country is beautiful. It's one of the real richest countries in the continent, and I think also in the world because of its minerals. And it can't be shared by few families. It must be shared by the people. I'm not going to blame white people and all that, but for us to have peace and stability and prosperity, let us share. It shouldn't be a few white families. Even white people struggle during these times. And that's why I say it's not just about color. For me, I always talk about non-racialism and not multiracialism. And therefore, if all of us can share, if a few families, 4 or 5, owns the entire country's wealth, it doesn't make sense. Let them share. Let them not monopolize. Let them not own each and every business in this country. It must be shared by Black people in general, Africans in particular, and all white people who have businesses. If all of us come together, I'm sure we can share the wealth of this country, and it will be wonderful to do so. It doesn't happen anywhere in the world where the majority, whether it's in China, the economy is owned by Chinese, whether it's any other country, Americans, the economy is owned by Americans. The economy must be owned by South Africans, but not a few families. And I say that will lead to prosperity, which we have never seen. We have seen political freedom. We live in peace and harmony. We don't worry about anybody's religion and all that. We don't worry about anybody's color. We want this is a beautiful country if all of us can come together and make everybody. I mean, South Africa is the most unequal society in the world. It tells you that there's no way we can live in peace and harmony. And that's why we will make a call upon all South Africans to come together and work together and make sure that we share the wealth of this country.
So for those in our audience who don't know, and we intercepted a voice clip from NDZ, which was a voice clip that she was discussing kind of the topic that you're talking about here. And what she specifically says is that when she refers to white monopoly capital, what she's referring to is the fact that there are 5 families, she says 31 individuals who own over 60% of the country. They own the majority of the land, they own the majority of the wealth, the mineral resources, the mining, and so forth. We can all guess who those families are, we kind of know who they are. So she says that in her view, when she talks of white monopoly capital, that's who she's referring to. But I suppose from my perspective, as a white guy, the biggest hurdle that we occasionally get with the rhetoric is not to draw reference to the families themselves, but to use the phrase white people, because then it effectively means, and a lot of white people take it personally, because it's referencing their racial characteristic. So I suppose the question I would have from me is, in your view, are white South Africans still African? Do we belong here?
Well, you were born in this country. You belong to the continent called Africa. I do regard you as Africans. Maybe in terms of sometimes our vocabulary and terminology, sometimes when we want to make emphasis of blacks in general, Africans in particular, because of what we come from, I'm not going to blame anybody. But yes, you belong to this continent. You remember during the years of struggle, we were fighting against white supremacy. But we are referring to the system. There was no way we were actually talking about individual white South Africans. Some of them were never even understand apartheid, were never even there. We are not blaming such people, we are blaming the system. And that's why we always refer to white racist regime. But it was not necessarily about individual South Africans who are white. Otherwise, there was no way we were going to call as Mandela and all of us. It's not just Mandela's policies or principles or objectives that I'm against white domination. And we are also against black domination. That's what Mandela said during the trial, Rivonia trial. But it was espousing the objectives, the principles, the pillars of the African National Congress as the movement of the people, never against white people in general. And that's why I agree 100% with NDZ, Comrade Nkosazana Dlamini's Zuma. And I think you have actually articulated it more better and proper. 31 individuals owning almost the economy. It doesn't make sense, really. It doesn't make this country to be prosperous. It doesn't make us share. It doesn't make those who don't have to have. This country is rich, and we are just a small population, 60 million. Go to China and India and many other countries with billions of people, but people there live, they have food to eat, they have water, they have electricity, they have basic needs. That's why in 1994, if you remember the Reconstruction and Development Plan, it was about the basic needs, having water, having electricity, having education, all the basic needs of our people. Food is important. A crisis of food and famine will lead to crime. And that's why if we can all come together, I think we can actually defeat all the social ills. And black and white. It's unfortunate, I've gone to a country called Cuba. You have people who are so pitch dark, so red, so white, whatever color, and they never worry about color. They worry about human beings. I so wish that South Africa was that. And that's what I fought for. That's why I've gone to jail. That's why I went to exile. That's why I decided to be a politician. It was for a better South Africa for all. And that's what even the ANC after 94, even during 94, it says the better life for all. So a better life means all of us who are inhabitants of South Africa.
So when you were in the previous or current government, so the ANC has been in power for excuse me, close to 30 years. What prevented the ANC from undoing these monopolies that you're talking about? Because you have political power, the state is very powerful. What has prevented the ANC from executing on its mandate to make a better life for all and to break up these monopolies?
Well, you will know that President Mandela was reconciling all of us, bringing all of us together, as well as the ANC, because Mandela could not do this thing without the ANC. And then President Mbeki also came in, more emphasis on South Africa and the continent. And President Zuma came in and he brought ordinary people, rich and poor, black and white, education emphasis. And during this period, you should also remember, maybe we were not that much vigilant. They call it corridors of power. Corridors of power sometimes make you feel that you have enough time and you'll never lose power. And therefore, in that process, a lot of us have been co-opted into the system. We then forget about ordinary people, black and white, ordinary people who don't have food, who don't have education and all that. And we passed laws, and there wasn't any will to implement those laws. Anti-monopoly laws, they are there. Anti-competition laws, they are there. But of course, we failed to implement those because I think we were politically assimilated and co-opted into the entire system. And we never became vigilant. It's only now that it's a wake-up call.
So we've said on our show, we've gone through some of the paperwork all the way back to Mr. Mbeki's era. I'm a big fan of Mr. Mbeki, just for my own reference. But I think he's probably one of the greatest presidents that we've had. I mean, we had massive economic growth during his time. Well, it wasn't without fault, but, it was the best we've had in the modern era. But from my recollection, from what I can tell, and from what I've gathered also from speaking to various individuals, a lot of the BEE legislation was really kind of an attempt by the corporates to hijack some of the ANC political elite. Because what they would then do is give them kind of shares into the businesses and then kind of say, well, you're entrenched now in the business, so you need to look after it. With that in mind, a lot of proposals have been made around scrapping BEE and actually turning it into a merits-based system, which focuses on the underrepresented, those who are marginalized in society, those who are in the poverty line, to uplift them. So we've heard it being said as well that, you get those kind of small tenders, the guy who gets to buy toilet paper, and those get taken up by the monopolies as well. So it doesn't actually uplift the poor. In fact, you find that a lot of the tenders are being used for, well, these same monopolistic entities. They're still enriching them. What would you do with BEE? Would you change it? Would you scrap it? Or would you morph it?
Well, I wouldn't say let's change the BEE because we are trying to introduce and say to those who are very, very filthy rich, those who take our minerals and the wealth of the country, we say let's share with ordinary people out there. Maybe the way it was implemented is something we can criticize people about, but it is a good economic policy if it can be well implemented. Not about the connected, not about politicians, not about leaders. And that's why at some stage there was a talk about broad-based economic empowerment, because people out there would even share. So we still need a formula which will make people comfortable. White businesses prosper even more, and a lot of white businesses started understanding and sharing. You can go to Rwanda, you can go to many other parts of the world. They actually basically say, for you to make business in our country, you need to ensure that there are participants who actually from local. Look at South African rugby today. They are performing very well. It's because there were also these things of quotas at some stage, and then, but quotas goes with merit. We are not just saying put them there. And that's how black rugby players were introduced into the rugby squad. And look how they excel. Until such time they come together, they complement each other, and you forget about quotas. But there must be a way of actually entrenching and making sure that our people participate in businesses. Why do you have to really even monopolies go to townships where the numbers are, and they open malls? And who benefits at the malls? They kill the township entrepreneurs. The monopolies are supposed to empower and work with township entrepreneurs and make sure that they benefit out of whatever businesses they do. So there are good models where BEE has definitely succeeded. We're not just saying do it for the connected, do it for those who are the elite. And it has actually happened. And I'm a proponent of Black economic empowerment done in a proper way. If I'm a politician, I've been a politician for years, but I've never been involved in business. I don't have business, so I've not even benefited. I've not been co-opted or assimilated by those monopolies, as you say.
So it just for clarity, for me, I agree with you. I don't like monopolies. I actually don't like corporates, and I mean large corporates. I think when a business gets to a certain size, the business starts to become cannibalistic towards the country. I think it starts to cannibalize things, and it goes deliberately against competition to entrench its own interests. So I'm a proponent of SMEs, small and medium enterprises. I think an economy, they're the lifeblood of any economy, and we should have them. But my question to you would be, is it not more difficult for a SME, a small business, to be started with red tape, such as BEE and implementing a quota when the business hasn't even started? I'll give you an example of that. There's numerous sectors, let's say in the gambling industry. In the gambling industry, you need to follow BEE legislation in order to get a license to open. But what that effectively does is it stops a mom and pop store, a mother and father opening something small that could serve a specific market entity. Is there not a danger that BEE done to small enterprises actually favors the large corporates and the monopolies, the very entities that you yourself say should share?
Well, that's why I say it only depends how you implement it. How do you bring it together? There are a lot of companies which have succeeded and which are still succeeding. If there is honesty in doing business, and both parties, the SMMEs and large business, if they mean for real, they are genuine and honest, we can go far as a country. That's what will actually unite even more our people, black and white. That's what will make SMMEs flourish if they can be given that opportunity. And honesty in business is important, and not people, what do they call it, they use the small businesses to achieve their own goals. If the playing fields can be leveled, I don't know why in gambling the small businesses and the big ones cannot come together and get a license. It depends how and who, and whether we understand things the way I'm explaining it. I'm saying BEE is the way to go, and broad-based Black economic empowerment is important for those who have, who can actually share with those who don't have, and build formidable companies which can actually employ more people. It's not just about making money, because I don't want a BEE like many, as you say, connected, and they have never worked for their money, but they are multi-billionaires, they are multi-millionaires. And a person has just any money by just attending board meetings, linking these companies with opportunities and all that. I want a BEE which is going to sweat and work hard, like you guys who have built your own businesses by working hard. I don't want somebody who just comes here and say, I've got a share here, give me my money, I've got 30%, 40%. People must work hard for their money. They mustn't get money over a month and then somebody becomes a multimillionaire over a month. That's where BEE fails. That's where racial polarization starts, because you are empowering the elite. You are empowering those who are connected. You are empowering us politicians. No, go to the ground and work with genuine Black business, Black entrepreneurs, white and Black.
So we heard you on Podcast and Chill during the course of last week, and I think you mentioned the fact that you said that you were a Marxist, or you come from a Marxist origin in terms of your sort of ideology, and then you mentioned, Cuba's a great place to follow in terms of what they've done there, but. So the devil's advocate will say, but Ace, to grow an economy, you must let businesses thrive. And then when they get bigger, they naturally employ more people and then get into partnerships with other businesses. Trying to force them to share, to use your terminology, is actually retarding growth in South Africa. It's making us a poorer country. What would you say to people whose argument that is?
I was saying Cuba. Why Cuba? Is because the people are united in the country. The people love one another. The people don't worry about color. They are the most beautiful people I have ever seen in the whole world. Because, as I said, someone is pitch dark, someone is white, the genes and all that, but they are a united country. You go to China, which you refer probably as a socialist communist, but the Chinese have always said, it doesn't matter what happens. If there is a system, if there is a white cat and a black cat, and both cats can catch a mouse, then it's a good cat. So I was just explaining what Marx was actually saying, that material conditions, things today are not the same as yesterday. So there is no need for us to stick to the past and say, well, I'm a Marxist, this and that. I was saying the Marxist says, define things because conditions determines what should actually happen. So if conditions in South Africa says today we need to do the following things, I'm saying we need to adjust. So I was explaining it from that perspective that Marx believed in material conditions. So the conditions then of struggle and the conditions now have changed. And more of us, black and white, are starting to come together. We shouldn't allow people to reverse the fact that we are building a nation in process. So we must still continue, because 1994 gave us that opportunity. We should never regress and now become racist when our children no longer know color. my children who are going to school with white kids are friends. And that's what we must actually encourage all the time and make South Africans know that we are proud as South Africans and as Africans in the continent of Africa.
So just in terms of 94, sorry, Brian, just one last thing. In terms of 94, do you think some of that goodwill has been squandered by your previous party? Do you think things could have done in a much better way than what they were to achieve this goal of sort of non-racial unity?
Well, I see in a way racism creeping in. I see what they call superiority and inferiority. During those years, we talked about white superiority and black inferiority. When I see black and white people fighting on the streets, I say, hey, we can't go back there. This is racism at its best. So I think we shouldn't allow. And through sports, through rugby, through soccer, through music, through interaction, I think we should actually dip in and make sure that we don't regress. We just need our kids. We need all of us to play that role. Black and white, we must play that role. It's not a role for South Africa, for politicians. It's a role for all of us, ordinary South Africans. And that's why I believe in the people. I believe the people themselves. But we need to educate our people. We never talk to our children about South Africa we want to build. We think that people just understand us. And we need to go extra miles, more than what we did during 1994. Here we were tortured and all that, but we never hated white people because we are not tortured by white people. We are tortured by the system and those who were perpetuating racial division and apartheid system.
Yeah, so for me personally, I always tell everybody, for me, I was raised by my nanny. Obviously, I was raised by a black lady. My parents weren't there much. Like most white South Africans, you're usually given to the domestic to raise. So most white South Africans are actually the products of their domestic workers. They're not the products of their families. So to say that no white family has actually had experiences with black individuals is a little bit fake. You know, I think a lot of white families should acknowledge that they have deep love for their nannies, their second mothers, because they obviously were raised by these individuals. So, but what I would say to you from that perspective is that a lot of whites don't naturally have a hatred of blacks. There seems to be a misunderstanding that that's a thing, right? That white people just as a whole dislike black individuals. And a lot of those white people feel like that alienates them from living in this country. So a lot of them have left. And so, as you know, we've seen high immigration to places like the UK, Australia, Canada. What would your party do to encourage our people back to Africa to build this place, to bring their money, their families, their kids? What would you do? What would your party do to encourage them back?
Well, we need to dialogue. We need to play our role. We need to have as many as white and black people joining this party. We need to lead by example. We don't have to talk. We must walk the talk. We must act and act together. I so wish a lot of white people can join this party and they become part of the leadership of this party. And that's why we have not declared the leadership yet. We're still going throughout the country. I've worked with the farmers. If you go to the Free State, it's just that the way the media has projected us, anti-white, radicals, militant. Why would I have joined the ANC and not any other party then during apartheid, which was fighting for non-racial, non-sexist, united, democratic, prosperous South Africa? And I went to jail, and I never hated white people post-apartheid and all that. But the way we are projected out in the media these ones are radicals. They don't want white people. What shows, what makes people think that we don't like white South Africans when in the Free State where I have grown up, even the person who took me to university was a white chap, a certain Mr. De Villiers from Sasolburg, who was the employer to my mother. My mother was a domestic worker in Sasolburg. Why will I hate such people? Why will I work with the likes of Beyers Naudé, who was called a rebel in the Afrikaans community, so Afrikaner community. So it's just the way we are projected by the media. I love South Africans, black and white. That's me. That's what this party is going to be about. Even if the majority, because of the system and the ideology of apartheid, I think it has messed up. People, when we form parties, will be joined by black people, coloreds and Indians, and maybe many whites think they don't belong here. I think this is their home. And unfortunately, I think we need a lot of education. We have not changed our education system to teach people about who we are, basically. I also wish that white South Africans and all South Africans can understand that I never had a grudge against white people, except that we are fighting the white system, white regime, and all the operators of the system, not individuals as white people, not at all.
So, Ace, we actually
And if you go to the Free State and you ask farmers, sometimes it's like, it's a small thing, but I used to sleep at their farms, from Bethlehem to Reis to Pieterstein to Bloemfontein. I slept at the various, and we even started a campaign where white people will visit us, will go to families, will visit them. That campaign was gaining ground during the likes of Beyers Naudé, and I think that time of President Mandela, we should have just sustained it, because our kids, my son who was at Grey College, his friends used to sleep at my place. He used to sleep at his friend's parents' place. So it's a small step, but we needed to mount it as a big campaign until we as South Africans understand that color doesn't mean anything. We are all human beings. As a Christian, I think that's what I believe in.
Yeah, that's what we believe as well. We actually made a video a while ago about telling white people to create ANC branches, because they keep saying, oh, the ANC is just full of, black Africans. And I said, well, the ANC is a democratic institution that believes in democratic centralism. Start an ANC branch in your area, then you'll have the ability to go to the leadership structures of the ANC and then, effect the changes that you want through debate, which is a very common ANC thing to do. I mean, unfortunately, our audience didn't really like that particular video. But for your purposes and for the African Congress for Transformation, if you were president tomorrow and you had absolute power, what are the top 3 things you would do immediately to make South Africa a better country?
Well, I've never wished to be a president. I've never thought I'll be premier. I just want prosperity for all of us. I want us to live side by side. I want us to make our children in future to have the best education. They must secular country. I would love to see us dealing with poverty. Those who don't have, if we can share the wealth and make them have a better life, which we have been talking about, if that better life can be stretched out to everybody out there in rural areas and all that, I don't know why we can have white suburbs paved and tarred, and we have townships with no water, with no sewerage, with no electricity, when we are such a rich country. So let's have all those things. I think they can actually assist us. That's what my wish will be. All of us must be human beings and treated as such. All of us must have food on the table. All of us must have water and electricity until we have prosperity, which will take years. We are not just South Africans. Sometimes, if you go to American politics, check how many years ago. So we are 30 years. I know people will say it's a lot of long time, but look at all the countries which have come from wars and all that. And I think we should just work hard ourselves. And I wish all those who will be leaders and members of this party act can go to white suburbs, organize and mobilize. White suburbs can come to us and say, what is it that we can do to be part of this organization and move together? And for that matter, we may even not want to elect leaders. We may want to say, hey, how can we build an organization? And who are the young white guys from universities who can join us and become part of the leadership? So we must identify people who have the zeal and the will to become leaders of this party, young as they may be, and volunteer even to become leaders. And we include them. And we see what happens, and we walk the talk. We don't just talk. We do things. I so wish we can move, and those who have assist those who don't have. I use my money sometimes per year. Maybe I spend more than 50, 100,000 when I'm working, and I pay for a school fees of somebody who completely is doing last year, and he owes university only 20,000, and the university says if you don't pay, you must leave. And the person is doing last year, academic year, and people who have can't just even think of paying 20,000. I think we need patriots who can actually, when they have, I'm not saying when they don't have, when they have, they can try and show that they care about South Africa.
So from what I can take from that, so your top three priorities based on everything you've just said is the first, you tackle poverty. The second is you'd recruit the youth from the universities to join your party. And the third would be that you would try encourage charity amongst patriots to get people out there to obviously grow the next generation. So, there's something that you mentioned earlier. I think it's actually a very interesting point that we talk about quite a bit. And that is, if you look at places like the US, there's a growing recognition that things are falling apart in the US. But one of the things you never hear from Americans is this idea that, okay, things in America are terrible, we must leave. Americans are still deeply patriotic. Even when the system is crumbling, they're still like, USA is the best. South Africans don't really have that mentality for whatever reason. We don't seem to have bought into this idea of being deeply nationalistic about our country. South Africa is all the way. But I must ask you a question, and that is, one of the big social problems in South Africa is obviously that of violence. As we know, we have a lot of crime in this country, and that causes a lot of people concern. Now, from your perspective, what is your view on firearm rights for the purposes of self-defense? Would your party continue to allow firearms for the purpose of self-defense, or are you not keen on that?
Firearms.
Mm.
I don't encourage ownership of firearms. If we cohabit, if we all live together, if we share the same, and if we all believe South Africa is the best, and I think all South Africans believe that South Africa is the best, I wish this party can can come and emphasize that South Africa is the best. South Africans, we are the best. Africans, we are the best. Believe in ourselves. Like, made us as Black people to say, we as Black people, we are also okay. I'm proud of my color and all that. So the countries, we are the best. We belong here. Rugby unites us. Sports unite us. Why can't we be united? Why can't we be patriots? So violence, it's something. It can be something of the past. We shouldn't just believe that government must fight violence. We must sit down. We must dialogue. We must educate. We must make sure that we fight all these ills. And violence will be there for as long as there are drugs in the country. The drugs is what is going to finish this lovely South Africa, because it's just, and drugs will lead to violence because violence leads to many other things. So if we can address social ills, if we can address poverty, if we can actually get our young people educated, for me, priority number one is education. And with education, we can deal later with poverty and unemployment. And we deal with racism. All these things, if they can go away, there won't be any need for violence in our country.
But do you support the private individual's right to own a firearm for self-defense?
Well, I think South Africa, you apply for a firearm. It's processed by, but we don't need proliferation of firearms in South Africa. We have been living in peace and harmony. We shouldn't live like in US with firearms all over. You get them easy and all that. We shouldn't. We should be against proliferation of firearms, and we should strive by all means to make South Africa a peaceful country. So I'm not. When after freedom, when they said we must return the firearms, I returned some of the firearms I had in the underground. I could have kept them, but I believe in this country, and I believe that this country can be as peaceful as we may wish and want. And it's a call upon us. We must deal with this violence. We must deal with crime. It's worse now. Crime is worse, and that is what is going to destroy this country. As South Africans, let's stand up. Let's not just look at government. People think government can do everything. Sometimes government has good policies, but they never implement. That's what the ANC always does, never implements its policies. If it was, we are going to have a very beautiful, lovely country. But we can still have, because the power is not politicians, the power is not government, the power is the people. And that's why we call ourselves a people's party. I wish it's not just going to be a dream. We must live that dream. It must be something which happens. And that's why I say I believe in young people, and I want young people to come and lead this organization. I'm sure it might be our 5-year lead and educate young people to take over and all that, because they must be taught proper. And I always say it's not just about young. Young must learn from the old. In which part of the world do you find young leaders running the country? They must first be nurtured. And once we are sure that we have enough pool of leaders, that generational mix must still be there, because the old also have a lot of wisdom. And the most countries which are successful, I've seen, they are led by old people, but we must infuse young and old. They must come together. And we must start educating them so that when we leave, if after 5 years I say I'm stepping down, I'm stepping aside, some we should have already groomed and nurtured. And that's why this organization, I want professionals, I want teachers, I want professors, I want doctors. If they can come and become part of the leadership of African Congress for Transformation, and they believe in South Africa, and they believe in all these things that if we share and if we live in peace and harmony, if we don't become racist, all of us, we have a wonderful country to live in.
So Ace, we're gonna unfortunately have to end it there. On the principles, we agree completely. More dialogue, better education, more social harmony for all the people of South Africa, because it is in fact a wonderful country, and most of the people inside are wonderful as well. So thank you very much for coming onto the show. Really appreciate your time. I know you're a busy man, so it's been a real pleasure to host you, and thank you once again.
It's
And
a
thank you so
pleasure,
much for
Byron and
joining
Rowan.
us.
All the best, and continue preaching. Never give up until we see a better South Africa for all.
We hope so.
Thank you so much.
I'm a fourth generation South African, my friend. I'm going nowhere, so you'll see lots
I'm
of us.
going nowhere. I mean, in this country. Sure.
Absolutely. Thanks very much for joining us.
Bye.